Welcome to my new channel. I think this is actually going to be my first video. I learned so much cool stuff over the course of time, and I try so many projects that I really want to share the information. And some of it's stuff I've never heard of, some of it's stuff I've spent years practicing, getting better at. Some of it's just stuff that I learned so young that it's second nature, but things that I think should be passed along as best as they can be. So I think today we're going to try a little bit of electrolytic rust removal. It sounds fancy. Really, all it is using water with a little bit of additive and DC electric current to remove rust from metal. So yeah, let's get started. Here's my dad's old battery charger. We've had this thing since I was a kid, and I'm 46 years old. So I think my grandma got it from my dad for Christmas when I was like 6 or 10 or something. Anyway, I've had it open before, and it's literally just a step-down transformer and a full-wave rectifier, which means that it takes the electricity out of your wall sockets, steps it down to 12 volts, and turns it into DC rather than AC. So there's that. Then we've got the bucket. These are just the clips from the battery charger. Normally those would clip to your battery. And you can see, for the moment, not plugged in. Be safe, don't be stupid. Now what we've got here is water from some stuff I was experimenting with last night. I wanted to do this a little bit and then do the video because I didn't want to suck. I wanted to make sure that it worked, all that stuff. I'm going to clean this up. As you can see, once you've actually used the plates, they get kind of messy, and the more stuff is deposited on them, the less electrical current you get, and so they tend to slow down a bit after a while. And what I'm going to try showing you guys has a lot of rust on it, so I want good contact and fresh clean water. So just give me a minute and I will before I clean these up, you can see this is what the anodes look like. No wait, this is the cathode. Whatever. This is the part that receives the rust, and this is the hanger that the rusty part will hang from. The negative clamp goes on the end of that wire and uses this other hanger wire to make electrical contact with the piece that's being cleaned. These two plates just get clamped to the sides of the bucket, and then that's where the positive clip goes. So give me a minute to clean these up. Come on. Better that way? I guess it's better that way. Okay, this is going to be hard because I don't have a camera stand yet. So what I'm going to do is prop you all up. All right, so first of all, what we have here is just a gallon jug of plain tap water filled up to this level. I've got my two metal plates that will basically become rust plated through this process, clamps to hold them onto the sides of the bucket, my hanger for the piece that we're working on, and then give me just a second. This is going to be fun because look at the rust on that thing. It's beautiful. It's going to give us a really dramatic effect to see how this works. So the first thing we need to do is suspend our workpiece on this wire, and usually I just there. We're not building a railroad with this. It doesn't have to be super duper secure. It just has to hold it. Damn it. Oh, I know what's wrong. The good, the bad, the ugly. I've got some extra wire wrapped around here so that I can make this loop bigger if I need to. And last night when I was playing with this, I was just cleaning up these wrenches that I got at a garage sale. And so I didn't need that much wire. But for this, I'm going to need a little more, I think. Slip that through there. There we go. That on that end, like so. Okay. And voila. There we go. We now have an electrically connected railroad spike. That's what those are called. Okay, now we need to hook these guys up. Now the way I do this, it's just a ice cream pail. It had a plastic loop handle that's got these little notches on the side that make really good clamping points. Get that wet. This is all improvised. So these are the little rubber feet from a shelving unit I got at Costco. Put that in there, hold it all in place, clamp over the top of it, clamp it down, and settle that down into the water. Now I'm using steel plates that I recovered from an old rear screen projection TV. And they were just convenient. I bent them a little bit so they fit the contours of the bucket, and then that little piece of rubber is just a spacer to help the clamps hold it in place. And you can see they're down in the water. If you've got any copper at all in your wiring or whatever, you want to make sure that that doesn't get into the water, because this electrolysis system will erode the copper and it will end up somewhere. It could end up on your workpiece, it could end up on your plates, but it'll make a mess. So, strongly recommend you pay attention to that aspect of things. So clamp tight, there we go. Here's my spacer. Oh, come on. One of these days I'm going to take the time to actually attach these spacers to these plates. Now the plates will get super corroded, or they'll look super corroded. Really, they're basically just rust plated, if that makes any sense. The rust will come off of our railroad spike and end up coating our there we go. Oh, that was kind of a pain in the butt. Anyway, the way this works is the electron flow will go through the negative pole into the railroad spike, out of the railroad spike, thereby blasting the rust away as they leave. They will then be attracted to positively charged plates. When that happens, they bring the rust particles with them and they become bonded to the plates. So what happens then is once you're done cleaning your piece, you essentially just sand the rust off of them and they're good to go. Now, over the course of time, they will get eroded. Eventually, they'll become thin and pretty much useless, and I'll have to change. Also, this electrolysis system is what they call kind of line of sight. In other words, if you want your piece to get cleaned, it's got to be between the plates on the horizontal and vertical plane. So what a lot of guys do is they'll take a 5-gallon pail and they'll take like 6 pieces of rebar just a little bit taller than the pail, and they'll line the inside of the pail with those, wire them together with copper or steel wire, and then attach their battery charger to the top of one of those. In this case, I'm just doing small pieces. I'm actually just getting started with this process. And so all I really needed was what I've got here. Eventually I'm gonna have to get to a bigger system, but the pieces that I'm trying to clean right now are also pretty small. So I'm not terribly worried about the rest of those details at the moment. Railroad spike. If you look, I got a problem. Railroad spike lined up with the end of the hanger bar. So I need to... There we go. That's better. So you can see what we've got. Oh! Almost forgot the most important ingredient. Ta-da! Now this water all by itself, plain distilled water, is barely electrically conductive. But if you add things to it, like salt for instance, it becomes extremely electrically conductive. But it needs those extra molecules for the electrons to basically skip from one to the other. And a lot of times you'll hear people say you need this kind of electrolyte or that kind of electrolyte or this kind of salt or that kind of salt. The most common one is actually washing salt, which is a more alkaline version of baking soda. So when I decided to try this, I was just going to use baking soda. I've heard that it works. The difference between the two is this. Washing soda is more caustic. It's alkaline, and it will irritate your skin. It also doesn't plate your receiving plates with a really dense, fine-grained coating. It tends to create big blobs of rust that will just slide off, which is nice because it's easier to clean your anodes. Anodes? Cathodes. Hang on. So Google is your friend. Here's the thing. Anodes and cathodes are both kinds of electrodes. The anode is the negative pole, which is, in our case, where the piece to be cleaned is. The cathode is basically the piece that we're plating. So that's easy enough. Anyway, getting back to the point. We take our ginormous Costco bag of baking soda, and I use this much. Plop it right in there. Then we grab something. I didn't think to bring a stirrer stick out here. Oh well. I'm just going to use a carpenter's square. All we're doing here is stirring the baking soda into the water so we get a good mix. Get that all mixed in there. If you do this with metal, be sure and dry it off so that you don't end up having to use the system to clean off your ruler. And then we take our anode. I forgot to hit record. I have no idea what the last thing I said was. I forgot to hit record. I missed the entire process. Well, I guess it's got to happen. I made a whole chunk of video without pressing the record button. Fortunately, in this case, all it means is that I had to make new baking soda water. So, back to where we were. We've got our railroad spike here. Rusty, caked, nasty, messy. And we're going to lower that into our solution. Little bit. Okay. Now, there we go. There's our railroad spike. Our electrodes are all in place. Negative pole is connected. Positive pole is also connected. Now I have the power to this shut off at the switch. So let's see, can I put this? It's too bright out here, I can't see what I'm doing. I want that to sit right there. Okay, I'm gonna hit the power. Ready? There we go. And if you look, we're actually getting bubbling off the spike itself. Right now the wire is bubbling really, really hard. It's mostly carbon dioxide. Depending on which salts you use, you can get a mixture of carbon dioxide, oxygen, hydrogen. Those are fun. It's a good way to blow up your front porch. Anyway, as this runs, you can start to see the swirls of material in the water that are leaving the railroad spike and attaching themselves to the electrodes. So we're basically rust plating our electrodes with rust generated by the spike. Now if we were to turn this process around, depending on where we hung our material and or which electrode was connected to which piece, we could use this exact same process to, say, strip copper off of a copper pipe and plate it onto another piece of metal. So this is basically the reverse of electroplating, but it's the exact same system. And now we're just going to let it run. That water is going to get cloudier and cloudier and cloudier and we'll check back on it in a little bit. As this runs, one of the things that I think is really cool is you get this really interesting stratification where you can see the bottom margin of the effective area of this process. And I mean, theoretically, I could do this in half the water. This way, I can shut it off, let all of that settle out, and then continue to use the water without having to change it quite so regularly. The only thing I have to do is add a little bit more baking soda as the electrolyte gets used up. But water's gotten really opaque. And as the process continues, you start getting some really interesting scummy junk on the surface. Okay, let's check and see. Remember I said we get some interesting scum? Yeah, check that out. Just lift that up and look at our spike. There's still a little bit of rust on it here and there, but it's cleaning up pretty awesome. I'll give it a little while longer. It's been like an hour? Maybe 2? I don't know. Maybe it's been 4. It's been a while. But what we've got here is this really interesting combination of scummy green and scummy brown with lots of foamy crap at the edges. So what we're going to do is, being safe, shut off the power. See, we got no current flowing. I'm going to disconnect the electrode wires. And what do I want? I want this. Here, let's spin around in circles. Remind me later, I'll give you guys a shop tour. Oh, what the hell? Let's just do it now. There's my chair. There's my workbench / end table / ashtray stand. There's a pile of tools and a ceiling fan, and there's my storage area. So this is apartment life, guys. You want to do projects, you got to work with what you got. There's my shop tour. All right, back to the deal at hand. Now you can see, maybe you can't see, I don't know, the lighting's terrible. There we go. You can see we've still got some scale on here. That's not mushrooms growing on the steel. That's actually blobs of old rust. And the interesting thing about this process is it seems to replace red rust with black rust. The difference is how they form. I can't remember the exact chemistry, but black rust forms basically underwater in, I believe, media with lower levels of oxygen. But basically, you get black rust underwater, red rust in the air. Black rust is a thinner oxide coating on the surface of the metal. Can you guys see that? Yeah, look at that really interesting etched pattern. I don't have any idea how old this railroad spike is. But black rust forms underwater, red rust forms in the air. Black rust, as I understand it, basically just coats the surface and then sits there. It doesn't continue to chew away at the material, whereas red rust will continue to flake away, and then a new layer builds, and then it flakes away, and then a new layer builds, and it will literally just rot steel. It would be nice if you're so far away. Come back, come closer. I wish to speak with you. Let's try this. Oh. Okay, that works. Anyway, it would be nice if you could just throw this in there and have it come out sparkly, shiny, clean. But as you can see, we've got gotten rid of most of the rust, but we've still got pitted surfaces, and now we've got a coating of, you know, I honestly don't know why the metal turns kind of greenish. In any case, what we're going to do is grab a nice little piece of 80 grit aluminum oxide sandpaper. And you can see we've already got metal showing through there. This is actually much easier to remove than bunches of red rust. I mean, we're already getting some nice metal shiny through there. Hang on just a second.
Okay. This is probably overkill, but I don't want to be breathing this rust dust. Makes nasty smells in your mouth and nose. So I'm switching to an automated, just going to use a Dremel.
Okay, so the phone battery died, but while I was waiting for it to charge up, I went ahead and put my dust mask on. Probably wasn't necessary because none of this is toxic, but when you're kicking up a lot of rust dust, you get it in your sinuses and in the back of your throat, and the rest of the day the inside of your head smells like rusty metal. It's gross. So I put the dust mask on, and I had a nice, I think this was an 80 grit sanding wheel on the Dremel, and that's what we got. And this altogether took about, 5 minutes or less, just to kick that coating of black iron oxide off of there. The difference is rust is thick, red rust. It builds up in layers and it can cake up and keep building under itself and eroding the metal. Black rust forms a single layer on the surface of the metal and seals itself off, so there's no more exposed metal to rust. Aluminum does the same thing, but the outer coating is basically invisible. You get almost a one molecule thick layer of aluminum oxide on the surface of aluminum, and that protects the aluminum. It can also intrinsically protect food and things stored inside of aluminum containers. In this case, what we did was blast off the big chunks of red rust and coat the metal in a layer of the black rust, and that black rust just blows right off. I'm pretty sure that, being that this is a very old mild steel, the greenish color that I'm seeing is probably from copper that was alloyed into the steel. That's my guess anyway. There was some greenish blue, very oxidized copper looking buildup both on here, and you can basically see it from here already. The water in the bucket. Brilliant, apparently. Anyway, there you go. Heavy, heavy, heavy rust. Electrically removed And we went from this to this. So there you have it, folks. Electrolytic rust removal. And it can blow through really thick, heavy rust coatings and give you a nice clean surface. The other thing that this process does that's really, I mean, I could grab this thing, hit a bench grinder, and grind it down, but what this process does is it will remove the rust in the pits without having to grind the pit flat. So you can keep that really, like if that old school metal surface is what you're looking for, that antiquing kind of thing, you don't have to grind it down and then antique the metal or whatever. You can literally get the rust off of it without losing that really cool patinaed look. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with this. I'll save this for another project. You know, I like forging railroad spike knives, but I don't have a forge here at the apartment. So anyway, there you have it. First YouTube video. Let me know what you think in the comments. Obviously, like, subscribe. Once you hit the subscribe button, you get a little bell next to it. Click on that, and YouTube will let you know every time I post a new video. Being that this is the first video, I need to get 1,000 subscribers and I think 1,000 views before YouTube will review my account and make it completely official. And you know, we get some traction, maybe I'll open a Patreon account. But for now, I'm Jared, and this has been fun. Signing off. See you next time.